This podcast is a proud member of the Unidentified Network.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in colour, it's Mr. Wayne Lovejuice.
The other day I produced a movie, had a chat with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithms really aren't that happy. If a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we decided we can text ya whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book on the track Xtra. Until 4.5 years ago, when she died, my late wife, Karina, used to do a regular segment on this show. It was called Watcher of the Skies, and it mostly covered rare and out-of-place bird visitors to the British Isles, but also covered peculiar bird behaviour and other bits of avian news from around the world. When she died, I thought that the segment should probably die with her, out of respect. But I had so many people ask me to revive it that after a long wrestle with my conscience, I brought it back. So, over to Karina to introduce it.
I have always felt a curious affinity with this species of bird, probably because for 30 years I was a secretary, and this is a secretary bird. A highly specialised ground-dwelling bird of prey from an older family than the other Old World raptors. It is native to sub-Saharan Africa and is sadly non-migratory, so will never be a natural visitor to these shores. But I think you'd be surprised quite how many completely unexpected avian visitors Britain does have, and that's what this segment on the track is all about. Bernard Heuvelmans himself said that cryptozoology wasn't the study of monsters, but the study of unexpected animals. And in the UK, what could be more unexpected than vultures, spoonbills and albatrosses? Yes, even the kings of the Southern Ocean have been seen in British waters. 2 species of albatross have been recorded in the UK in recent years. Not all of our feathered visitors are quite so spectacular, but nearly every day there is something exciting to greet the Watcher of the Skies.
However, first of all, we need a little geography lesson. These are the British Isles. They are an archipelago off the coast of northwestern Europe. This, being the largest island in the British Isles, is Great Britain, or in French, Grande Bretagne, so called because it is the largest island. This is the island of Ireland, otherwise once upon a time known as Lesser Britannia. Why was it called Lesser Britannia? Because of the horrible yoke of Britain trying to impose her will upon the rest of the archipelago? No, don't be stupid. It was called Lesser Britannia because it was the smaller of the 2 main islands. The island of Great Britain is divided into 3 countries: England, Scotland, Wales. The island of Ireland is divided into 2 countries, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, otherwise known as Ireland. The 3 countries of England, Scotland, Wales and the province of Northern Ireland put together are known as the United Kingdom. They have been the United Kingdom ever since 1810 and the Act of Settlement, when the diverse countries, or at least Scotland and England, became one. Sadly, I've had lots of people misunderstanding what I'm saying and accusing me of being overly nationalistic and all sorts of other things for using the words Great Britain. Well, hopefully, as you will see from this, I'm doing nothing of the sort. Now, on with the show.
Lobster! Lobster! Lobster!
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we've got that out of the way, and I hope that satisfies your curiosity, Mr. Proud Irish American who was incensed at my use of the word Great Britain, because we're now going to go on to something far more interesting. We're going to talk about divers. Now, regular viewers of this show and regular CFZ watchers will know that I've always been a great fan of the children's books of the late great Arthur Ransom. The books known generically as the Swallows and Amazons books, which are named after the first of the series, were written in the 20s and 30s and early 40s. And have been formative influences on me and many other people ever since. And those of you who followed our research trips to the Lake District in 2006-2007 and our research trip to Ireland in 2009, when we were chasing up stories of giant eels, will know that we were following in the footsteps of Arthur Ransom and his various characters, and his fingerprints were writ large over our research, and I've got to get round to finishing writing up the book that I'm about a quarter of a way through writing about this research project, because it is actually jolly interesting. But changing the subject again, the last of the Swallows and Amazons books was published in the late 1940s, quite a few years after its predecessors, and it's called Great Northern. And it is about the main characters on a trip, a cruise around northern Scotland and the Outer Hebrides, looking for various species of rare bird, including something called the Great Northern Diver. Well, I finally saw Great Northern Divers for the first time swimming in the estuary at Topsham outside Exeter a few years ago. When I say a few years ago, it's more like 25 years ago. And they were remarkable little creatures. They looked incredibly amphibious and really didn't look like birds at all. And I spent a very happy afternoon with Richard Freeman watching them ducking and diving through the muddy estuary. The fact that we were sat in a nice warm pub with cold pints of beer, watching them as we did, just made things even better. Now, I had always assumed that the Great Northern Diver was going to be the biggest of the diver species, but actually it's not. The yellow-billed or white-billed diver, why the same bird has two such contradictory common names I'm not really sure, is the largest member of the diver family. Breeding adults have a black head, white underparts and a checkered black and white mantle. Non-breeding plumage is drabber with the chin and foreneck white. Its main distinguishing feature is the long straw yellow bill, because the culmen is straight, appears slightly up-tilled. Now, just because I'm not sure what that is either, a culmen is the dorsal ridge of the upper mandible, likened by ornithologist E. Curris to the ridgeline of a roof. That makes sense. This species breeds in the Arctic and winters mainly at sea along the coasts of the northern Pacific, and sometimes along the northwestern coast of Norway. It also sometimes overwinters on large inland lakes and occasionally strays well south of its normal wintering range. And that is exactly what it's done on this occasion. Now, if I may, I'm going to go over to the Rare Bird Alert on X, the thing that used to be called Twitter. Northumberland was to prove a fruitful location for sea watching this week, with sightings of white-billed diver coming from Creswell Pond on the 6th and 7th, at Hawksley Nature Reserve in Druridge Bridge, and on the 8th and 9th at Druridge Bridge Nature Reserve as well, and a further individual was seen to the west at Waterfoot, County Antrim. But this wasn't the only interesting, in fact very interesting, diver to be reported from the British Isles, because in Ireland the second winter Pacific diver remained at Glenach Quay on the 3rd, and a further juvenile was reported on the 9th at Cavetown Loch. Traditionally, the three species of diver which were found in the British Isles were the red-throated diver, the black-throated diver, and the great northern diver. This species, the Pacific diver, was for many years considered to be conspecific with the black-throated diver, but in 1985 it was elevated to pure species status of its own. Just to talk slightly about it, the genus name Gavia comes from the Latin for seamew, as used by ancient Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder. The phylogeny of the species is debated, with the black-throated diver and the Pacific diver traditionally being considered sister species, whereas a study using mitochondrial and nuclear intron DNA supported placing the black-throated diver to a clade consisting of the Pacific diver and the two sister species, which are the great northern diver and the common diver. Now, this species is arguably even more exciting to be found in Britain than was the yellow-billed diver, because it is only supposed to breed in parts of North America and Siberia. One of the main ways that you can distinguish this species from the black-throated diver is that, unlike the black-throated diver, in fact unlike all other species of diver, the Pacific diver will migrate in flocks. And this might explain why there are two separate individuals of this northern Pacific species found at the moment in parts of Ireland. There is quite a lot of concern amongst conservationists at the moment that climate change is going to adversely affect the status of many diver species, and it is something to consider that the fact that every few winters, and especially in this winter, two vagrant diver species have turned up in the British Isles completely unexpectedly. Could this be something to do with climate change, or could it just be one of those things? One of those things being probably the best naturalist excuse for anything peculiar that happens. I've said before on this show how I believe that a diver species, probably the great northern diver, is responsible for one of the most iconic images of cryptozoology, the so-called surgeon's photograph, allegedly of the Loch Ness Monster, which was taken coming up for being 100 years ago. The official explanation is that it is a hoax using a toy submarine and plastic wood, but I think it's more likely to be one of these wonderful little birds. Now, I have always been fascinated by divers, but it's not the different species of British diver that inspired this fascination. It's not the fact that I believe that one of these primitive little birds is responsible for the most well-known image of the Loch Ness Monster. It's because of this book. I really, really cannot recommend it highly enough. It is a wonderful book, written for children, but appreciated more and more by adults, and I cannot recommend that anybody interested in the natural world should study the books of Arthur Ransom, because they will repay your effort 100-fold. And just as a final little tidbit, Arthur Ransom was planning to have a book set in Kenya when the children from the Walker and Blackett family, the Swallows and the Amazons, went to visit a relative in Kenya where, guess what? They would encounter the Nandi bear. Sadly, the book never happened, but it's just another little link between Arthur Ransom and cryptozoology. I'm going to be back on Saturday. What am I talking about on Saturday? Well, it's the first part of a two-part interview with a young man called Harlan, who runs the Cryptid Britannia podcast on YouTube and has had some fascinating encounters of his own. Be there or be square, and I'll be seeing you.